The ground beneath your feet holds a secret history of global catastrophe. Ancient stories of epic floods and sky fire were not just fiction, but fragmented memories of real planetary disasters. This video uncovers the global cataclysm that turned ancient myths into geological evidence, revealing a startling new way to understand our past. You will discover how science is proving our ancestors witnessed earth-shattering events, and why this knowledge is crucial for our own future. We will explore why cultures across the world share the same terrifying legends, and what triggered the sudden collapse of early civilizations. What does it feel like to realize your oldest stories might be true? Nearly every culture on Earth tells a story of a great flood. The details echo each other across continents, a hauntingly similar narrative passed down through generations. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh tells of the god E, who instructed the hero Utnapishtim to build a giant boat to save his family and the animals from a world-destroying deluge. In the biblical book of Genesis, Noah receives a similar divine warning, constructing an ark to survive the rising waters. Far across the world, the indigenous peoples of the Americas have their own versions. The Maya spoke of a great flood sent by the gods to destroy a race of wooden people. These are not just isolated tales, they form a global chorus, a shared memory of a cataclysm so profound it was seared into the human story. The parallels are impossible to ignore, a warning from a higher power, a single righteous family chosen for survival, a vast boat built to precise specifications, carrying the seeds of all living things. A great rain that swells the seas, drowning the world of old, and finally, a promise, a rainbow, a new beginning. Why would cultures with no possible contact, separated by oceans and millennia, tell the same fundamental story? It is a puzzle that has fascinated scholars for centuries. The most compelling explanation is that these are not mere myths, but fragmented records of a real event, a geological trauma so immense it was witnessed by humanity's earliest ancestors and never forgotten. Now, science is beginning to uncover the physical evidence that supports these ancient accounts. Geologists drilling into soil layers far from any modern coast have found deposits of marine sediment, the fossils of tiny sea creatures buried deep inland. In regions like the Black Sea, vast plains show signs of sudden, catastrophic flooding around 7,600 years ago, when rising global sea levels burst through a natural land bridge, turning a freshwater lake into a saltwater sea almost overnight. This was not a gentle, creeping rise, but a wall of water that would have swallowed entire settlements, displacing thousands and leaving a scar on the collective memory of the survivors. Could this be the origin of the flood myth? It is a powerful and plausible theory. These stories force us to reconsider the power of oral history, not as simple fables, but as the long, resilient echo of a real and terrifying event that reshaped our world. But the Great Flood is only one chapter in this global story of disaster. Another legend, just as enduring, speaks of an entire civilization vanishing into the sea. For centuries, Plato's account of Atlantis has been dismissed as a philosophical allegory, yet his description is startlingly specific. He wrote of a sophisticated, powerful empire with advanced engineering, an island nation situated beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Its downfall was not a slow decline, but a sudden, violent collapse. In a single day and night of earthquakes and floods, the entire island was swallowed by the sea and disappeared. This was not a story of a slow erosion, but of a cataclysm. Modern researchers have scoured the globe for its possible location, from the sunken structures near Bimini in the Caribbean to the vast, submerged landscapes around Dogger Bank in the North Sea. The most compelling geological evidence, however, points to the Mediterranean. On the island of Santorini, which was once a single large volcanic island called Thera, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of a magnificent Minoan settlement buried under layers of volcanic ash. This was a sophisticated Bronze Age society, a contemporary and rival of ancient Egypt. Then, around 3,600 years ago, the Thera volcano exploded in one of the largest eruptions in human history. The blast was so powerful it shattered the island, creating the caldera we see today. It would have generated tsunamis hundreds of feet high, racing across the Aegean Sea to devastate the coast of Crete, effectively ending the Minoan civilization. For any survivors, the world they knew literally sank into the ocean. This event fits the timeline and the catastrophic description of Atlantis's fall almost perfectly. The story of a great empire lost to the sea may well be the fragmented, amplified memory of this very real geological catastrophe, passed down through generations until it was recorded by Plato. This mystery forces us to look deeper, beyond the myths and into the very ground and sea, where the evidence of earth-shattering events is written in stone and sediment. These stories of sunken lands and epic floods are anchored in the earth and sea, but other ancient memories point to the sky. Legends from across the globe describe a time when the sun itself seemed to go mad. Chinese mythology recounts a period when 10 suns rose in the heavens, scorching the earth until the hero Hui shot down 9 of them with his bow. On the other side of the world, certain Native American traditions speak of a great heat that burned the land, a time when the sun moved too close to the world. For a long time, these were seen as pure allegory, stories explaining the power of the sun. But what if they too hold a kernel of geological truth? Scientists drilling deep into the ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica have uncovered a startling record in the ice cores. They have found layers containing sudden, massive spikes in isotopes like beryllium-10 and chlorine-36. These are the chemical fingerprints of extreme solar events, moments when our sun unleashed colossal storms of radiation that bombarded our planet's atmosphere. These solar proton events would have been unlike anything we experience today. They could have drastically altered the climate, causing widespread droughts and that great, scorching heat described in the legends. The evidence does not stop with the ice. The rings of ancient trees, those silent chroniclers of our past, also bear the scars. From one year to the next, tree rings show a pattern of stunted growth, a sign of intense environmental stress that aligns perfectly with the dates of these potential cosmic events. For an ancient observer, what would this have looked like? The sky might have shimmered with intense, unnatural auroras, visible even at mid-latitudes. The air itself might have felt charged and strange. The sun, obscured by high-altitude dust or ice crystals, could have appeared to multiply into sundogs, creating the illusion of multiple suns in the sky. It is not difficult to see how such a terrifying, awe-inspiring spectacle would be woven into a story of divine archers and celestial battles. These were not just fantasies, they were the best explanations our ancestors had for the incomprehensible forces reshaping their world. The myths of an angry sun are not mere superstition. They are the human reaction to very real astrophysical phenomena, a bridge between the stories told around ancient fires and the data we now read in ice and wood. This forces us to look even deeper into the cosmos for other threats that may have left their mark, not just in our stories, but in the very bedrock of our planet. The world has recorded more than just a mad sun. There are stories of a day when time itself seemed to stop, The biblical book of Joshua recounts a moment of divine intervention, where the leader Joshua commands the sun to stand still in the midst of a crucial battle, prolonging the day so his army could achieve victory. This is not an isolated tale. Across the Atlantic, legends from the Americas speak of a night that lasted far too long, a period of extended darkness that brought fear and uncertainty. Why would such different cultures with no shared scripture describe the same impossible phenomenon, a fundamental hiccup in the daily cycle of light and dark? These accounts point to something far more profound than a simple miracle. They hint at a moment when the Earth's own rhythm was profoundly disrupted. Scientists have proposed several theories to explain what ancient observers might have witnessed. One compelling idea involves a near miss with a large comet or asteroid. The gravitational pull of such a massive object passing close to our planet could have temporarily altered Earth's rotation, creating the perception of a longer day or night. Another possibility lies not in space but within our own atmosphere. A colossal volcanic eruption, like the one that destroyed Thera, can fill the sky with ash and aerosols for years. This dense layer can bend and scatter sunlight in extraordinary ways, creating prolonged, eerie twilight conditions that make it seem as though dawn or dusk is frozen in place. For an ancient person, this would have been a world-shattering event. The sun and moon, the most reliable markers of time, would have betrayed their predictable paths. The very order of the cosmos would have felt broken. It is no wonder that such a terrifying, inexplicable experience would be woven into the foundational texts of a culture, attributed to the power of a god or the magic of a hero. These stories are not literal records of the sun halting in the sky, but they are powerful human testimonies to a real and terrifying geological or astronomical event. They show us how our deepest beliefs can be forged in the crucible of natural catastrophe, a moment when the sky itself seemed to obey a new and frightening law. The sky itself has fallen in stories from every corner of the globe. Greek poets told of Phaethon, the boy who seized his father's son's chariot only to lose control, scorching the earth and setting the world ablaze before being struck down by Zeus's thunderbolt. On the other side of the planet, Aboriginal traditions speak of a great fiery serpent crossing the heavens, its passage marked by flame and devastation. These are not casual tales of campfires but vivid accounts of celestial terror. They describe a rain of fire, landscapes reduced to ash, and stars that seem to fall from their fixed positions. What could have left such a powerful and universal imprint on the human imagination? The answer is written in the very ground we walk on. In the summer of 1908, a remote Siberian forest near the Tunguska River was the site of an incomprehensible event. A massive explosion, hundreds of times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, flattened over 800 square miles of ancient trees. The shockwave was felt hundreds of miles away. For days, the night skies over Europe and Asia glowed so brightly that people could read newspapers at midnight. Scientists now believe this was the airburst of a stony asteroid, perhaps 200 feet across, that disintegrated before it could hit the ground. If it had arrived just a few hours later, it could have obliterated a major city. Imagine witnessing such a thing, a blinding flash, a roar louder than any thunder, and then a wind that tears the forest from its roots. For an ancient culture, this would be the undoing of the world, a divine punishment written in fire across the sky. The geological record holds even older scars. The Barringer crater in Arizona is a stark, silent testament to a direct impact. This colossal hole in the ground, nearly a mile wide, was created by a nickel-iron meteorite just 50,000 years ago. And when scientists drill into soil layers and ice cores, they find other clues: thin, dark bands rich with soot and charcoal. These are the signatures of continent-spanning wildfires, infernos so vast they blacken the sky. While some fires were started by lightning or volcanoes, the simultaneous presence of rare metals like iridium, an element common in asteroids but rare on Earth's surface, points to a terrifying trigger. A large enough impact would have thrown superheated debris back into the atmosphere, which would then rain down as a storm of fire, igniting everything it touched. The legend of Phaethon is not just a myth about a boy who flew too high. It is a plausible human account of watching the sky turn into a furnace. The story of the fiery serpent is not mere symbolism, but a record of a blazing comet's trail seen by the first Australians. These tales are our earliest disaster reports, a warning passed down through countless generations about the very real danger that can fall from the stars. Long before Plato wrote of Atlantis, another lost continent haunted the human imagination. In the late 19th century, an explorer named Augustus Le Plongeon proposed the idea of Mu, a vast Pacific civilization that was the mother culture of the world before it sank into the ocean. According to the legend, this advanced society was destroyed in a single night by earthquakes and floods, a story that echoes the fate of Atlantis and the great flood myths we have already explored. Mainstream archaeology has long dismissed Mu as a fanciful fiction, a product of imaginative speculation with no basis in fact. Yet, the persistence of the story raises a fascinating question. Could the legend of Mu, like so many others, be a distorted memory of a real geological event? The answer lies not in finding sunken cities, but in looking at the slow, inexorable dance of the Earth's crust. Recent geological surveys have confirmed the existence of Zealandia, a continent almost entirely submerged beneath the Pacific Ocean. This is not a myth, but a scientific reality, a landmass larger than India that is 94% underwater. During the last ice age, when vast amounts of water were locked up in glaciers, much more of Zealandia stood proudly above sea level. It was a sprawling landscape of hills, valleys, and rivers, a potentially habitable world for early human explorers. Then, as the Ice Age ended, the glaciers melted and the seas began their slow, relentless rise. This was not a sudden cataclysm in the way we might imagine a tsunami, but a creeping inundation that spanned thousands of years. Imagine you are part of a coastal community living on this land. Your grandfather tells you stories of an island that once lay just over the horizon, an island where his own grandfather hunted. You can no longer see that island. It vanished beneath the waves before you were born. Now you must tell your own grandchildren to move your village further inland as the shoreline creeps closer each season. Over just a few generations, the entire world of your ancestors can disappear under the sea. What would that story become after 1,000 years of retelling? The slow, relentless sinking of a continent becomes a single, terrible night of destruction. The gradual drowning of a homeland becomes a divine punishment that swallowed a civilization whole. The legend of Mu may not be a record of a specific city, but it could very well be the collective, compressed memory of this profound loss of land. It shows us how oral tradition can take a long, terrifying geological process and condense it into a powerful, dramatic myth of a world lost beneath the waves. Perhaps the most startling geological theory is that our entire world has, at times, simply slipped. The concept of a rapid polar shift, or crustal displacement, was seriously explored by a historian named Charles Hapgood in the mid-20th century. He proposed that the Earth's rigid outer shell, the crust, could slide over the molten interior as a single unit. If the planet became unbalanced by the immense weight of ice caps, the entire outer skin might shift to re-establish stability. This would not be a change in the planet's axis in space, but a dramatic repositioning of the continents themselves relative to that axis. Lands that were once in temperate climates could, in a geological blink of an eye, find themselves at the poles. This radical idea offers a potential explanation for some of the most perplexing mysteries in the fossil record. In the far north of Siberia, the remains of woolly mammoths have been discovered perfectly preserved in the permafrost. Some of these animals were found flash frozen so quickly that the food in their stomachs was still identifiable, revealing a final meal of buttercups, sedges, and other temperate plants that could not possibly grow in the Arctic today. How could a mammoth be grazing on warm climate flora one moment and be frozen solid the next? A rapid crustal shift provides a chillingly simple answer. The land they lived on was suddenly and violently moved into a polar region, triggering an instantaneous climate catastrophe. The theory also casts a strange new light on ancient maps. The famous Peary Rise map of 1513 appears to show the coastline of Antarctica, a continent that was not officially discovered for another 300 years. Even more baffling, it depicts parts of the continent free of ice, a condition that geology tells us last existed millions of years ago. If the map is based on older, lost sources, could it be a copy of a chart made by an ancient civilization that saw Antarctica before it was glaciated? This would only be possible if the continent was in a different location, a place where humans could actually live and map it. The scientific community remains deeply divided on the mechanism for such a shift, with many geophysicists arguing the forces required are implausible. Yet evidence of rapid magnetic field reversals and the strange, global distribution of certain fossils continue to intrigue researchers. Whether such a shift happened or not, the psychological impact of the idea is profound. For the humans who might have lived through it, a crustal displacement would have been the ultimate cataclysm. The sun would have risen and set in the wrong places. The familiar constellations would have spun into new patterns. The very ground beneath their feet would have moved. Is it any wonder that virtually every culture has a myth about the sky falling or the world turning upside down? These stories of cosmic disorder may be the most accurate memory of all, a haunting echo of a time when the entire planet lost its bearings. The idea of a world slipping out of place is a profound geological mystery. But there is an event in our planet's recent history that provides some of the most compelling evidence for a real global cataclysm. Around 12,800 years ago, the Earth was slowly emerging from a long ice age. Glaciers were retreating, temperatures were rising, and the world was becoming more hospitable. Then, without warning, everything reversed. The planet was thrown back into a deep freeze for a period of over 1,000 years. This bizarre climatic U-turn is known as the Younger Dryas. For decades, the cause was a puzzle. The prevailing theory pointed to a sudden influx of glacial meltwater disrupting ocean currents. But a more dramatic and controversial explanation has gained traction. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis proposes that our planet was struck by a comet or asteroid, or perhaps a fragmented swarm of them. The evidence for this is written in a very specific and very strange layer of Earth. From North America to Europe and parts of South America, scientists have identified a thin, dark band of sediment they call the black mat. Below this layer, you find the fossils of mammoths, giant sloths, and the distinctive stone tools of the Clovis people, one of the earliest known cultures in the Americas. Above the black mat, these giants and their hunters are simply gone. It is a stark line in the geological record, marking a moment of profound extinction and cultural collapse. So what makes this dark layer so special? It is packed with anomalies. Researchers have found microscopic nanodiamonds, which form only under immense pressure and heat, like that from an extraterrestrial impact. They have discovered tiny spheres of melted glass, material that was superheated in an instant and then cooled just as fast. There are also elevated levels of iridium and other rare elements, the same celestial fingerprints found at the crater that wiped out the dinosaurs. This is not the slow creep of climate change. This is the signature of a sudden, violent event. The immediate aftermath would have been hell on Earth. The initial fireball and shockwave would have incinerated millions of acres of forest. The heat would have been so intense it could have melted the ice sheets, sending colossal volumes of water pouring into the oceans. The dust and soot thrown into the atmosphere would have shrouded the planet, blocking out the sun and triggering that brutal, centuries-long winter. For the humans living through it, the world would have ended not once but twice. First came the fire from the sky, then the unending cold and darkness. Their way of life, their food sources, their very understanding of the world, all of it would have collapsed in a geological heartbeat. Is it any wonder that this single event, burned so deeply into the collective memory of survivors, could be the common source for so many of our most enduring myths? The great floods, the raining fire, the long night, the disappearance of a previous age of giants, the search for the main impact crater continues, a scientific detective story spanning the globe. But the clues left behind in that thin black line tell a story far stranger than any fiction, a story of a day when the sky fell and the world froze, a day our ancestors never forgot. The thin black layer of the Younger Dryas is not the only time stamp of disaster hidden in the earth. Sometimes the evidence is not darkness, but a stark, white line of acid. Ice cores drilled from the ancient glaciers of Greenland and Antarctica reveal these pristine, frozen archives in stunning detail. Within these columns of ice, scientists find distinct, high-concentration layers of sulfate aerosols, the chemical ghosts of volcanoes that erupted thousands of years ago. These are the fingerprints of planet-altering explosions, events so powerful they filled the global atmosphere with a sun-blocking shroud. The most recent and well-documented example of this phenomenon occurred in 1815. Mount Tambora, a volcano in Indonesia, erupted with a force that remains the largest in recorded human history. The explosion was heard over 1,000 miles away. It ejected so much ash and sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere that it reflected a significant amount of sunlight back into space. The very next year, 1816, became known as the year without a summer across Europe and North America. Snow fell in June, crops failed in July, frosts in August led to widespread famine and food riots. It was a sudden, inexplicable plunge into cold and darkness for people who had no understanding of atmospheric science. They simply experienced a world where the seasons had broken, and they wrote of it in their diaries with a sense of profound dread. Now, trace that sulfate spike in the ice cores back further, much further. Around 74,000 years ago, the Toba volcano in Sumatra unleashed a super eruption, an event orders of magnitude greater than Tambora. The resulting volcanic winter may have lasted for years, potentially dropping global temperatures by several degrees and pushing some early human populations to the brink of extinction. Can you hear the echo of that ancient disaster in our oldest stories? Cultures worldwide have myths that describe a long, bitter period of cold and darkness, a time when the sun was dimmed and the land would not yield food. The Norse told of Fimbulwinter, 3 years of endless snow that would precede the end of the world. In the highlands of Peru, legends speak of a time when the sun nearly disappeared, bringing a great chill that killed the people and the animals. These are not just tales about a bad winter. They are narratives of a fundamental breakdown in the natural order, an event so traumatic it could only be explained as the wrath of an angry god. The geological evidence locked in the ice provides the physical proof. The myths give that proof a human voice, a terrified, awe-struck account of what it feels like when the sky turns to ash and the warmth of the sun is stolen. This is the tangible link, the bridge between a chemical signature in a glacier and a story told around a fire for generations. It reveals that the gods of ice and famine were often born from the very real, very geological violence of our own planet. The bones of giants and monsters were not always confined to legend. Scattered across the ancient world, people stumbled upon enormous skeletons emerging from eroding riverbanks and crumbling cliffs. These were not the bones of any creature they knew. The ancient Greeks, uncovering the skull of a dwarf elephant, would have seen a vast central cavity where the trunk attached, a single, gaping hole they could only interpret as a massive eye socket. In their minds, this was not an extinct elephant, but tangible proof of the one-eyed Cyclops, a creature from their oldest stories. On the other side of the world, Chinese farmers plowing their fields would occasionally unearth long, serpentine backbones and enormous, unfamiliar skulls. They carefully collected these bones, calling them dragon bones, and believed them to possess powerful medicinal properties. These were likely the remains of dinosaurs like the sauropod, whose colossal vertebrae strung together perfectly to form the body of a mythical serpent. The process is deeply human. When confronted with the petrified evidence of a world they never knew, our ancestors did what we all do. They used the framework they had to make sense of the impossible. A mammoth tusk became the horn of a unicorn. The skull of a saber-toothed cat might have inspired tales of monstrous, fanged demons. These stories were not deliberate falsehoods. They were the first attempts at paleontology. They represent a powerful, instinctual drive to explain the physical world, to populate the empty spaces on the map with creatures that could account for the strange relics under their feet. Our folklore is, in a very real sense, a museum of natural history written long before we had the words for extinction or evolution. It shows us that the line between myth and science was once incredibly thin, a frontier where every strange bone told a story of a world that came before. The same volcanic fury that shattered Thera and fueled the legend of Atlantis may have left its mark on one of the most famous stories ever told. The biblical book of Exodus recounts a series of 10 devastating plagues inflicted upon ancient Egypt, a narrative central to faith. Yet, when we look at these events through the lens of geology, a startling pattern emerges. A colossal volcanic eruption can poison rivers with ash, making the water toxic to fish and turning it a bloody red. It can fill the sky with a dense, abrasive cloud of pumice and dust, creating a darkness so thick it can be felt, a darkness that would blot out the sun for days. It can even trigger secondary disasters, like tsunamis in the Mediterranean that could have temporarily swept coastal waters back, exposing land before crashing back in a devastating wave. Such an event would have provided all the raw physical ingredients for the plagues. The timeline is the key. Ice cores from Greenland contain a distinct layer of volcanic acid from around 1600 years before the Common Era. Geological deposits of Thera's unique ash have been found in the Nile Delta, carried there by the winds. This evidence firmly places the Cataclysm during the Egyptian New Kingdom, the very period often associated with the Exodus narrative. This is not about proving or disproving a miracle, but about understanding the powerful intersection of earth and story. For the people living through it, a volcanic eruption of that scale would have felt like the gods themselves were at war. The world was literally falling apart, the air was poison, the water was undrinkable, and the sun, the god Ra, had been extinguished. it is not difficult to see how such a profound trauma would be interpreted as divine judgment and woven into the spiritual identity of a people. The story of the plagues stands as a powerful testament to how human beings process incomprehensible disaster, transforming the terrifying chaos of geology into a narrative of liberation and divine purpose. The sea itself can hold a grudge for millennia. Along coastlines from the Pacific Northwest to the islands of the South Pacific, indigenous cultures tell strikingly similar stories of a great wave, a wall of water that rose without warning to devour their villages. These are not tales of ordinary storms, but of something far more monstrous. In Japan, the legend of the Nami-Cabe, the wave wall, was a recurring nightmare. For the native peoples of the Pacific Northwest, stories tell of a thunderbird battling a whale, a conflict in the spirit world that made the ocean rear up and crash upon the shore. These narratives, passed down for thousands of years, were long seen as pure folklore, symbolic explanations for the power of the ocean. But the ground beneath these very shores tells a different, more terrifying story. Geologists examining coastal sediments have uncovered bizarre layers of deep-sea sand and marine fossils deposited far inland, piled atop ancient village sites. These are the calling cards of a mega-tsunami, a wave of almost unimaginable scale. One of the most dramatic pieces of evidence comes from the North Sea. Around 8,100 years ago, a vast section of the continental shelf off the coast of Norway, known as the Storegga Slide, catastrophically collapsed. An area of seabed the size of Scotland broke away and slid into the deep ocean. This movement of trillions of tons of sediment displaced an immense volume of water, triggering a tsunami that radiated across the ocean. The wave, estimated to be over 60 feet high, smashed into the coastlines of Scotland, Norway, and the low-lying plains that then connected Britain to mainland Europe, a land known as Doggerland. The sedimentary fingerprints of this wave have been found over 20 miles inland. For the Mesolithic hunter-gatherers living there, it would have been an event of biblical proportions. One moment the sea was calm, the next a roaring, unstoppable wall of water was tearing through their world, drowning the game-filled forests and coastal settlements in an instant. What explanation could there be for such a thing, other than the fury of a sea god or the thrashing of a colossal beast? Further proof is written in the drowned forests found along many coastlines. These are the stumps of ancient trees preserved in salt water, with their roots still anchored in soil that was once dry land. They stand as silent witnesses to a sudden, permanent invasion by the sea. A single, catastrophic wave can explain this, scouring the land and leaving it submerged. When you hear a legend from the coast of India about the sea rising to punish a wicked king, or a story from the Andes about the god Viracocha commanding the ocean to flood the land, you are likely hearing a geologically verified event. These myths are the human heart of a disaster report, the only way our ancestors could process the incomprehensible sight of the ocean leaving its basin to claim the earth. The floor of the Black Sea holds a secret buried in layers of mud and silt. Geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman first pieced this puzzle together, proposing a cataclysm that reshaped an entire region. Their hypothesis suggests that around 5,600 years before the Common Era, the Black Sea was not a sea at all, but a vast freshwater lake lying hundreds of feet below the level of the global ocean. It was a fertile basin, likely dotted with early farming communities along its sprawling shores. Then the world changed. The rising Mediterranean Sea, swollen by melting glaciers at the end of the last ice age, finally pushed past its natural dam. The land bridge at the Bosporus, the narrow strait that separates modern-day Turkey from Europe, did not simply erode, it was catastrophically breached. Imagine a waterfall of unimaginable scale, not just a river, but an entire ocean pouring through a fractured mountain pass. This was not a gentle, creeping rise. It was a deluge. The salt water of the Mediterranean thundered into the freshwater basin with a force that is almost impossible to comprehend. The water level of the Black Sea may have risen by dozens of meters, its shoreline advancing by up to a mile each day. For the people living there, the world was literally ending. The land they farmed, the homes they built, everything they knew was swallowed by a relentless, rising wall of water. What would you do if you saw the horizon itself begin to move, the sea reclaiming a continent with terrifying speed? The geological proof for this event is pulled from the deep. Core samples drilled from the seabed reveal a stark transition. Below a certain line, you find the shells of freshwater mollusks, the quiet remains of a calm lake. Above that line, the sediment is packed with the fossils of saltwater organisms. The shift is not gradual, it is sudden, marking a violent and permanent change in the very nature of the basin. This was a regional disaster of biblical proportions, but its story did not stay local. The survivors of that flood would have scattered in every direction, carrying with them the terrifying tale of the day the sea broke its bonds. They would have become refugees, bringing their story to the emerging civilizations of Mesopotamia and the Mediterranean. Is it so difficult to believe that over generations, as this story was told and retold, it became the epic of a global flood? The details are hauntingly familiar: a divine warning, a chosen few who escape, a world washed clean. The Genesis flood narrative, and so many others like it, may not be a memory of a worldwide inundation, but the powerful, amplified echo of a very real, very local trauma that scarred the human story forever. One single geological event, preserved first in mud and then in myth. Ancient timekeepers looked to the heavens not just to mark the days, but to predict the end of an age. The Maya long count calendar is a masterpiece of astronomical precision, a complex interlocking of cycles that measured vast expanses of time, culminating in a much-discussed end date. This was not a prediction of final doom, but the closing of one great cycle and the beginning of another, a concept deeply embedded in their worldview of repeated creations and destructions. Each cycle's conclusion was thought to be preceded by a great upheaval, a cleansing of the old world to make way for the new. What could have inspired such a profound belief in cyclical catastrophe? The answer may be written not only in the stars, but in the very ground beneath their temples. When scientists examine the layers of sediment in lakes and ocean floors, or the chemical records locked in ancient ice, they sometimes find a startling rhythm. Periods of intense drought, volcanic activity, or even evidence of meteor showers appear to pulse with a rough cadence that mirrors these long astronomical cycles. It seems our ancestors were not just philosophers of time, they were its historians, recording the traumas of the earth and sky and encoding the pattern into their most sacred institutions. These calendars were living narratives, tools to prepare for the next potential collapse. They represent a desperate, brilliant attempt to impose order on a cosmos that had proven itself violently unpredictable, to find a warning in the regular motion of the planets against the backdrop of sporadic terrestrial chaos. This deep-seated drive to find rhythm in the ruination reveals a fundamental truth about our species. We are pattern seekers, and the most important pattern we ever tried to solve was the timetable of our own planet's fury. A towering ash tree stands at the center of the Norse cosmos, its roots drinking from 3 separate springs and its branches holding the 9 worlds. This is Yggdrasil, the axis of everything, yet this same profound symbol appears in the shamanic traditions of Siberia as a great pine, and in Mayan cosmology as the sacred ceiba tree, a pillar connecting the sky, the earth, and the dark realm of the dead. Why would cultures separated by entire oceans all envision the universe as a single, central tree? This recurring image of the world tree might be more than a spiritual metaphor. It could be the human mind trying to give form to one of the most invisible yet fundamental forces shaping our planet, the Earth's magnetic field. Think of the magnetic field not as a map, but as a colossal, invisible structure emanating from the poles, a scaffold of energy that envelops the entire globe. For an ancient seer or a shaman in a deep trance state, this pervasive energy might have been perceived as a great, vibrating pillar at the heart of all creation, a central axis around which the spirit world turned. This was not a random guess. It was an intuitive mapping of a genuine planetary force, interpreted through the most powerful symbol they knew, the Tree of Life. But what happens when that pillar shakes? Geological records confirm that the Earth's magnetic poles are not fixed. They wander, and at times in our deep past, they have completely reversed. A compass needle that pointed north would suddenly point south. During these periods of instability, the magnetic field, our planet's protective shield, would have weakened dramatically. The sky would have been filled with intense auroras, not just at the poles but across the entire world. The sun's radiation would have increased on the ground, and animal migrations, which rely on this magnetic sense, would have been thrown into chaos. For a human society that saw the cosmos as a stable, ordered tree, this would have been the equivalent of watching Yggdrasil shudder to its roots. The heavens themselves would have seemed to be coming undone. Is it any wonder that Norse mythology describes the squirrel Ratatoska running up and down the great tree, carrying messages of strife and gossip that set the worlds at odds, a symbol of cosmic discord? Or that the Maya believed their world trees required blood sacrifices to remain standing, a desperate attempt to stabilize a universe that felt like it was slipping away. These stories of a trembling Axis Mundi are not just tales. They are the mythological testimony of a species that lived through a planetary instability, a time when the very navigational heart of the world was lost. The persistence of the world tree across the globe suggests that our ancestors were not just storytellers, but sensitive witnesses to the deep, rhythmic pulses of the Earth itself, encoding its most dramatic shifts into the very roots of our shared imagination. The ground itself could speak to the ancient Greeks, its voice a faint, sweet-smelling vapor rising from a crack in the earth. At the sanctuary of Delphi, a priestess known as the Pythia would descend into a sunken chamber, breathe these mysterious fumes, and slip into a divine frenzy. Her ravings, interpreted by attending priests, shaped the destiny of kings and the launch of wars for centuries. For the Greeks, this was the undeniable presence of the god Apollo. But modern geology has uncovered a startling truth. The very rock upon which Delphi was built is crisscrossed by two major fault lines. These fractures do more than just cause occasional tremors. They act as channels for groundwater, which reacts with bituminous limestone deep below to produce ethylene, a potent gas known to induce trance states and euphoria. The seismic activity in the region would have periodically agitated these subterranean reservoirs, causing the gas to seep more strongly, directly influencing the intensity of the oracle's visions. The god's arrival was not a metaphor, it was a measurable geological event. This profound link between the Earth's restless energy and human spirituality echoes across the globe. In Japan, the hot springs of Kusatsu are not just for bathing. They were considered sacred portals, their bubbling, sulfurous waters a direct connection to the kami spirits of the earth. The native peoples of the American Southwest built kivas, their ceremonial chambers, partially underground, aligning them with the deep, silent power of the planet. In every case, a powerful natural phenomenon, a steaming vent, a rumbling mountain, a toxic spring, became the physical anchor for the divine. Our ancestors were not simply inventing gods to explain what they did not understand. They were standing at the intersection of the tangible and the transcendent, interpreting the literal breath of the planet as a message from another world. The line between a geologic fault and a divine messenger was not just blurred, it never existed at all. Off the western coast of India, the waves whisper a name from a time of gods and heroes. Dwarka, the legendary city of Lord Krishna, was said to be a place of unparalleled splendor, its walls inlaid with precious stones. Ancient texts describe its tragic fate, claiming the magnificent city was swallowed by the sea after Krishna's departure from the world. For centuries, this was considered a beautiful, symbolic myth, a story about the transient nature of earthly power. Then, marine archaeologists began to look beneath the waves. What they found there sent ripples through our understanding of history. Submerged in the depths of the Arabian Sea, just off the modern shoreline of Dwarka, lie the remains of a vast, ancient settlement. The ruins are startlingly real, a ghost city of stone. Divers have mapped massive stone blocks, some weighing many tons, arranged in clear geometric foundations. They have recovered ancient pottery shards, intricately carved pieces, and stone anchors that would have moored ships long since turned to dust. These are not natural formations. They are the unmistakable footprints of a sophisticated, coastal civilization that thrived here thousands of years ago. The dating of these artifacts places them squarely in a period that aligns with the traditional timeline of the Mahabharata epic, the very text that chronicles Krishna's life and the glory of Dwarka. This discovery forces a profound question. Is the sunken city of legend simply this drowned settlement, its story preserved and amplified over millennia? The geological explanation points not to a divine cataclysm, but to the same relentless forces we have seen across the globe. At the end of the last ice age, as the glaciers melted, sea levels rose dramatically. The coastlines of the world changed shape, drowning low-lying plains and river deltas. The land upon which this ancient port city was built may have also been slowly sinking, a process known as subsidence. The combination of rising seas and a sinking shore would have been a recipe for disaster, a slow-motion inundation that, over generations, would have claimed streets, temples, and homes. For the inhabitants, it must have felt as if the ocean itself was claiming a debt, pulling their world, stone by stone, into the deep. The myth of a city sinking in a single day is likely the poetic compression of this centuries-long process, a dramatic retelling of a very real geological trauma. The ruins of Dwarka stand as a powerful bridge, connecting the epic poetry of a golden age to the tangible, waterlogged evidence of a lost world. The entrance to the underworld was not always a metaphor. For the ancient Greeks, it was a real cave at Cape Tinaran, a place where the living could supposedly descend to meet the dead. The Maya believed a cavern known as Xibalba served as the terrifying court of the death gods. Across the globe, these dark, subterranean realms were described with chilling consistency, filled with rivers of fire, poisonous vapors, and strange, echoing sounds. It is no coincidence that these mythic landscapes mirror the very real and dangerous geological features our ancestors would have encountered. Imagine stumbling upon a gaping sinkhole, a seemingly bottomless pit descending into absolute blackness. Or hearing the unearthly hiss of steam and smelling the rotten egg stench of sulfur from a volcanic vent. For a people with no concept of geology, these were not natural formations, they were portals. The ground itself was breathing, speaking, and leading to another world, a world of the dead. The sheer sensory terror of these places, the oppressive darkness, The unsettling sounds and the disorienting gases provided the perfect raw material for stories about the afterlife. We can see this connection made permanent in places like the Derinkuyu underground city in Turkey. This is not a simple cave, but an immense, multi-level city carved deep into the volcanic rock, capable of sheltering thousands. While it served as a practical refuge from invaders, its very existence shows a profound familiarity with the subterranean world. The line between a shelter and a sacred space is thin. The same tunnels that provided safety could also host rituals meant to commune with the spirits believed to dwell below. The underworld was not an abstract idea, it was a physical reality, a layer of the earth that was both feared and revered. Our spiritual concepts of hell, of judgment, of a land of the dead were not born in a vacuum. They were forged in the deep, silent darkness of caves, lit by the faint, flickering glow of torchlight on stone, and filled with the echoes of a world just beyond our own. These ancient stories were not written down for thousands of years. They lived in the human voice, passed from parent to child across countless generations as epic poems, cautionary tales, and sacred songs. This was oral tradition, a living library of memory long before the invention of writing. A catastrophic event like a flood or a sky of fire would have been far too significant to forget. It would have been woven into the very identity of a people, a story told and retold with each telling reinforcing its core truth. While the specific details might shift over centuries, the name of a hero might change, or the reason for the god's anger might be refined, the central cataclysm itself remained. A world-destroying wave does not become a gentle rain over time. The memory of the ground shaking and the mountains burning does not simply fade away. This is where mythology and geology find their most powerful partnership. Scientists are now learning to listen to these ancient stories as potential leads, as historical data preserved not in stone but in verse. They compare the narrative to the physical evidence, asking a simple but profound question: does the story match the strata? The results can be startling. Aboriginal Dreamtime stories from Australia offer some of the most compelling evidence. These narratives, passed down orally for what seems an impossible length of time, describe in precise detail the coastline as it existed over 7,000 years ago. They tell of bays and headlands, of islands that are now submerged, and of river systems that now flow on the seabed. This is not a vague recollection. It is a specific, accurate geographical memory that has survived for hundreds of generations, a map sung into existence long before it could be drawn. This proves that oral history, when grounded in a shared, traumatic, real-world experience, can possess an incredible longevity and accuracy. It validates these myths not as mere fables, but as valuable historical sources, the first drafts of human history written in the most durable ink we possess, memory itself. The next time you hear an old story about a great flood or a falling star, listen closely. You might not be hearing a fairy tale. You might be hearing the echo of a disaster, a geological report from the dawn of time. Even the mightiest empires are no match for a changing sky. The Akkadian Empire in Mesopotamia was the world's first great superpower, its influence stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. Then, around 4,200 years ago, it shattered. For centuries, historians blamed invasions or political unrest. But the answer was written not on crumbling tablets, but in the slow drip of water deep within a cave. Scientists studying stalagmites in Iran have analyzed the precise chemistry of their growth rings. These stone pillars revealed a devastating truth, a mega-drought that gripped the region for over a century. The lifeblood of the empire, the rain that fed the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, simply vanished. The farmlands that fed the cities turned to dust. How would a society interpret such a catastrophe? The Curse of Akkad, an ancient text, provides the answer. It describes a world where the rains failed, the fields yielded no grain, and the rivers held no fish. The gods, it was said, had withdrawn their blessing from the king. The climate itself was seen as a divine punishment, a broken covenant between heaven and earth. The same story echoes across the globe, and centuries later, the classic Maya civilization of Central America built towering pyramids and sprawling cities, a testament to their intellectual and artistic genius. Then their society collapsed in a series of waves. Pollen records from lake sediments tell a chilling tale of transformation. As the Maya population grew, they cleared vast tracts of forest for agriculture. This deforestation, combined with natural climate shifts, triggered severe and repeated droughts. The very land they had mastered turned against them. The inscriptions on their monuments changed from celebrating kings and conquests to desperate pleas for rain and offerings to appease angry gods. The world they knew, a golden age of abundance, was literally drying up before their eyes. The geological evidence for these ancient climate crises is now overwhelming. Ice cores, lake beds, and cave formations all tell the same story of instability. When the climate shifts, it pulls the rug out from under human civilization. Food systems collapse, water sources disappear, people are forced to migrate, leading to conflict over scarce resources and the eventual transformation of entire cultures. This is not a new story. It is the oldest story of human existence on this planet. Our own climate challenges are not an isolated event in history. They are the latest chapter in a long, interconnected relationship between a volatile planet and the fragile societies we build upon it. The myths of a fallen golden age are not just nostalgia. They are the ghostly memory of real soil turning to sand and real rains that never came. A brilliant comet blazing across the night sky was more than a spectacle, it was a message. For ancient societies, this sudden, unpredictable visitor was a direct communication from the gods, an omen that could topple kings or forge new empires. The famous Bayeux Tapestry, which chronicles the Norman conquest of England, immortalizes this belief. As William the Conqueror prepared his invasion, Halley's Comet streaked into view. The tapestry shows a crowd of terrified Anglo-Saxons pointing at the star with long hair, a clear sign they interpreted it as a portent of their impending doom. This was not mere superstition, it was a powerful psychological weapon. The comet's appearance was seen as a divine endorsement of William's claim, demoralizing his enemies and galvanizing his own forces. Half a world away, the ancient Indian epic, the Mahabharata, describes weapons of immense power and a war that nearly ended the world. Some researchers now suggest these descriptions of celestial fury, of arrows that shone like 100 suns and could reduce entire armies to ash, might be a distorted memory of a comet's airburst or impact event. The scientific evidence for such a connection is being pulled from the ice. Deep within the glaciers of Greenland, ice cores reveal thin, dusty layers from specific years, layers rich with platinum and other exotic elements commonly found in cometary debris. These chemical spikes in the ice often align perfectly with both known comet sightings in historical records and periods of profound social collapse or transformation found in the archaeological record. A single, terrifying light in the sky could shatter the foundation of a civilization. When the established priesthood could not explain the comet or prevent the famine or plague that sometimes followed, their authority crumbled. This created a vacuum, a desperate need for new answers and new connections to the divine. It is no coincidence that periods following celestial upheaval often saw the explosive birth of new religious movements and cults, all seeking to make sense of the gods' apparent anger. The comet was not just a herald of destruction, but a catalyst for rebirth, forcing humanity to reinvent its understanding of the cosmos and its place within it. This celestial influence reveals the incredible fragility of the ancient world, where a single streak of light in the darkness could rewrite the course of human history. This emerging field even has a name: geomythology. It is a discipline that deliberately blurs the line between science and the humanities, treating the epic stories of our ancestors not as fairy tales, but as potential eyewitness accounts. The pioneering geologist Dorothy Vitaliano championed this idea, arguing that legends of the Great Flood or the Earth Shaker Poseidon might not be pure imagination, but rather the human interpretation of very real earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions. In this view, a myth becomes a form of data, a cultural fossil that preserves the memory of a cataclysm long after the dust has settled and the waves have receded. This interdisciplinary approach creates a powerful feedback loop. Geologists can use these stories to pinpoint areas for investigation, to look for the physical evidence of an event they might have otherwise overlooked. In turn, folklorists and historians gain a deeper, more tangible understanding of why certain stories were so important, so foundational to a culture's identity. They were survival guides encoded in narrative. Our ancestors may have attributed a tsunami to a sea god's anger, but their description of the ocean pulling back before a monstrous wave rises is a perfectly accurate observation of a real geological process. They were brilliant observers of the natural world, even if their framework for explaining it was different from our own. This fusion of geology and mythology does not diminish the stories, it enriches them. It reveals a shared human experience of a dynamic and sometimes violent planet, and it promises to unlock new chapters in our deep history, chapters written not in ink, but in the very landscape and the legends it inspired. These ancient warnings carved in stone and story are not relics of a bygone age. They are a blueprint for our own survival. The same forces that reshaped continents and toppled empires are still at work today, and our civilization is just as vulnerable. By studying how prehistoric societies weathered massive environmental changes, we are not just exploring history, we are rehearsing for the future. Imagine a world where we could read the signs of a supervolcanic eruption centuries in advance, not from satellites, but from the collective memory of a culture that lived through one. These myths are humanity's long-term memory, a vital record of planetary risks that our short historical records have completely forgotten. They remind us that climate can shift in a generation, that the sky can fall, and that the ground beneath our feet is not always stable. This is not a call to fear, but a call to awareness. Decoding these stories with the tools of geology gives us something priceless, a deeper timeline of disaster. We see patterns of resilience and collapse written across millennia. Some societies faced with a changing climate fractured and vanished. Others adapted, moved, and found new ways to live. Their stories hold the keys to understanding what separates survival from extinction. This knowledge is our greatest tool. It empowers us to look at a future of potential asteroid impacts, extreme climate shifts, or volcanic winters not with blind terror, but with the hard-won wisdom of our entire species. We are the first generation that can read this ancient library of catastrophe, and that makes us the first generation that can truly learn its lessons. The myths were our first science, and now science is returning the favor, proving that the most important stories are the ones that keep us alive. Our journey reveals a profound and humbling truth. Our ancestors were not primitive storytellers inventing fantasies around a campfire. They were survivors, eyewitnesses to the very real and violent upheavals that forged our world. The great floods, the sky fire, the long winters, and the shaking earth were not mere allegories. They were traumatic, shared experiences that became the bedrock of our cultures, our religions, and our deepest fears. These stories were their way of making sense of a planet that could, without warning, erase everything they had built. By uniting the hard data of geology with the ancient poetry of myth, we are not diminishing these legends. We are finally learning to listen to them. We are giving a human voice to the silent evidence written in ice cores and sediment layers. This fusion of science and story gives us a far richer, more complete picture of our past. It shows us that human history is inextricably linked to planetary history, a saga of resilience in the face of cosmic and terrestrial chaos. This knowledge is not just about understanding where we came from, it is a crucial lens for seeing where we are going. Our modern civilization, for all its technology, sits on the same restless earth, under the same unpredictable sky. The myths are a timeless reminder of our vulnerability and a testament to our incredible ability to adapt and endure. They are encoded warnings from the depths of time, memories of a world remade, urging us to remember the forces that are far greater than ourselves. We would love to hear which of these ancient stories resonates most deeply with you. Was it the global flood, the lost city of Atlantis, or the fire from the sky? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more journeys to the edge where history and science meet.